Hello, my name is Jeremy Houck, and I'd like to thank you for making the choice to join us here at the Greenbrier Church Online. Before we get started today, I want to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest because it's just between, you and God. Who's that person for you? You know who I'm talking about, right? The person who, when their name pops up on their caller ID, suddenly you are very busy organizing your sock drawer and you're going to have to call them back in like 2032. The person that you spot in the grocery store, and without even thinking about it, you quietly turn down a different aisle. The one that, when they're walking towards you on the sidewalk, all of a sudden, the window of the store across the street becomes the most interesting thing that you've ever seen. We all have someone like that. Maybe it's your coworker who makes every conversation about politics, or maybe it's your family member that's made a mess of their life. Again, maybe it's a whole group of people, a different social class, a different lifestyle, a different set of choices. And if you're honest, you're not even sure that you want to try to understand them. I want you to hold on to that feeling because Jesus is about to say something that's going to make us very uncomfortable. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Picture the scene. Jesus is teaching, and there are two very different crowds listening, and they couldn't be more different from one another. In the first group, they've pressed in close. These are the tax collectors and the sinners, the traitors and the addicts, the ones with a reputation that everybody whispers about. These are the people who live their lives out on display. There's no pretending, no polished exterior, and maybe that's exactly why they're drawn to Jesus. Because for the first time in a long time, somebody is looking at them without disgust. You can see it in his face. So they press in closer. They hang on every word, and something stirs inside of them. Something they haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Then there's the second group, and they're standing in the back with their arms crossed. These are the Pharisees, the good church people, the ones who know the rules and they follow them, the ones who've never missed a service, the ones that know all of the right answers. And Luke tells us that they're muttering. You know, I love that word, muttering. They're not brave enough to say what they have to say to his face, so they say it under their breath. These are the ones that are in the parking lot or out in the foyer after the service is over. These are the ones that have the group chat. And they're grumbling about the fact that Jesus isn't following their rules. They're scandalized by the fact that Jesus doesn't just talk to sinners, he eats with them. Now, in our world, that's not a big deal. It doesn't sound like a whole lot. I mean, we eat with all kinds of people. But in Jesus's world, sharing a meal meant something entirely different. If somebody put their feet under your table, you were making a statement. You're saying, I accept you. You belong here. We're family. A meal is an act of fellowship and responsibility. So when Jesus pulls up a chair and breaks bread with a tax collector, an addict, a woman with a reputation, he's not just being polite. He's giving them his time, his attention, and a declaration that they have value and worth. And that's exactly what the Pharisees couldn't stand. You see, they don't have a problem with Jesus's theology. They have a problem with his dinner guests. And knowing exactly what they're thinking, Jesus tells them a story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? Now, I'm not a shepherd, but I do know basic math. And from a purely practical standpoint, what this shepherd does, well, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you have 100 and you lose one, that's a 1% loss. The smart move, the responsible move is to protect the 99 that you still have. You don't leave the majority unguarded in the wilderness to chase after the one that wandered off. That's how a small problem becomes a much larger one. Any sensible manager, any good steward of their resources would just cut their loss and move on. And here's the thing. I think I agree with the Pharisees at this point. It makes sense to write off the one. You protect the majority. You always prioritize the stable, the reliable, the ones who show up and do the right thing. That's efficiency. That's wisdom. But Jesus turns all of this on its head. The shepherd leaves the 99 like it's the most obvious thing in the world. And to many of us, that just sounds irresponsible. I mean, I don't know anybody that would do that. But Jesus says that's the kind of God we serve. And I'm eternally grateful that God is the one who gets to decide who's worth searching for. Here's something I learned a few years ago. Sheep aren't sweet, fluffy little creatures who accidentally take a wrong turn. According to the author Philip Keller, sheep are notoriously stubborn. They don't wander off through rebellion, they wander off through distraction. A sheep lives with its head down, moving from one patch of grass to the next. One thing leads to another, and then another, and then another. And then one day the sheep looks up and it has no idea where it is. They're all alone at the edge of a cliff, tangled up in thorns, terrified. The sheep doesn't mean to end up there, it just never looks up. And I wonder if that sounds familiar. I don't know. Maybe you didn't dramatically walk away from God. There's no big moment of rebellion, no dramatic falling out. You just got busy. Life got complicated. Your faith started to get crowded out slowly. And then one day you look up and you realize you have no idea how far you've drifted from God. That's the lost sheep. And you're not alone. Today, churches all over the world have their share of lost sheep. But they also have the other group in the story as well, the 99 who stayed put, the ones who follow the rules, the ones who, as far as they can tell, they're just doing fine. I mean, they're good members. They teach a Bible class. They lead a ministry. They're the Pharisees. These good church folks live by a very sound logic. 99% is an A. That's success. Build your community around the stable, the committed, the put together people. Protect your core. After all, going after 1% that's wandered off, that's a waste of resources. But here's the uncomfortable truth of the parable, and I don't want you to miss it. God's math is different than our math. God doesn't operate on a scale of acceptable losses. He doesn't look at humanity and say, yeah, I've got most of them. That's good enough. Every single person matters. Not because they're impressive, not because they've earned it, but because they belong to a shepherd who is so obsessed with the one that he's willing to look irresponsible to the 99. He's willing to risk his reputation to search for the lost. And notice what Jesus says about how the shepherd searches. He doesn't send out a committee. He doesn't hire someone else to go out to look. He doesn't post a notice and hope for the best. He goes himself into the wilderness, through the ravines and the thorns, into the dark valleys, and he searches until. Not until it gets dark. Not until he gets tired. Not until enough people tell him, you've done your part, the sheep has made its bed and just needs to lie in it. He searches until he finds it. There is a relentlessness to God's love that I think we constantly underestimate. We live in a world where love comes with fine print, where acceptance is conditional, where if you make enough mistakes, that's going to exhaust my patience. But that's not the God that Jesus is describing here. Grace doesn't leave a pamphlet in a truck stop bathroom and walk away. Grace doesn't shout from a comfortable distance and call that outreach. Grace goes into the mud, into the thorns, into the dangerous places because grace pursues. Now, this is the part that excites me because I've been guilty of rushing past it for years. When the shepherd finally finds the sheep, this is where you might expect a scolding, a lecture, at least a very long, silent walk of shame back to the fold. But that's what we would do, right? You dumb sheep, look at the trouble you caused. You better never do this again. Or maybe we just make the sheep limp home on its own. After all, we're exhausted from the search, right? But listen to what the shepherd actually does. And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. Think about what that means. The sheep doesn't find its own way back. The sheep doesn't clean itself up first. The shepherd doesn't ask the sheep to meet him halfway. The sheep's only job, its entire contribution to this rescue, is to stop struggling and let itself be carried. You don't receive grace when you figure it out on your own. You don't receive grace when you stop running. You receive grace when you allow the shepherd to place you on his shoulders and carry you. I think somebody needs to hear that today. Maybe you've been trying to earn your way back to God. You're fixing your mistakes, cleaning up your act, healing your own wounds because you don't feel worthy enough to come home yet. You're limping towards the fold, thinking that if you can just pull yourself together enough, then maybe God will accept you. Jesus isn't waiting at the gate with a checklist. He isn't standing there with his staff raised, ready to punish you before he lets you back in. Jesus has been out in the wilderness looking for you. And when he finds you, he doesn't demand that you walk home. He simply says, will you allow yourself to be picked up, put on my shoulders so that I can carry you home rejoicing? And then he throws a party. Not a small, quiet, dignified celebration, a party. He calls together his friends and his neighbors. He tells everybody. And then I think Jesus looks directly at the muttering Pharisees and says, in the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. There's more rejoicing. The celebration in heaven is louder, more joyful for the one who comes home than for the 99 who never left. That's the scandal of grace. And I understand why it bothers us, because the party seems to be for the wrong people. God gives grace to the wanderers, the messed up, the ones who finally stopped pretending and came home. The guest of honor at heaven's party is always the formerly lost, probably still smelly, definitely exhausted sheep. That's why Jesus ate with sinners. He's not condoning their sin. He's giving them a foretaste of the Father's heart. He's showing them and showing us what the celebration looks like when somebody comes home. And the question he's turning to ask us is, where do you want to be? Do you want to be standing outside in the dark muttering about the guest list? Or do you want to be inside where things are a little messy? The guests are a little rough around the edges, but they're the ones who get to attend the party. Here's the quiet tragedy of the Pharisees that I don't want us to walk past. They were physically standing next to Jesus, but spiritually, they were farther from God than the tax collectors who knew that they needed him. The righteousness had become a wall instead of a door. And I wonder how many of us are in the 99 in ways that we don't even recognize. We're in the right building, we know the right songs, we take communion, we Venmo some money to the church, we show up. But somewhere along the way, we started muttering. We look at the people who are making a mess of their lives and we feel judgment instead of compassion. We feel confusion or even offense that God would freely extend grace to the people that don't deserve it in our eyes. Our relationship with God has quietly become a transaction of good behavior instead of a daily celebration of grace. And because we think we don't need grace, we never get to experience the joy of being found. Here's a hard truth. You will never be found if you don't know you're lost. Today, we're all in this story, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. You're either the one or the 99. Maybe today you realize you're that lost sheep. You know you're far off. Your life feels like a wilderness, maybe one of your own making. You're tired of wandering. You might believe that God's angry with you, that you've used up all of your chances, and that the church is nothing more than a country club for folks that got it all together, and you definitely don't. The good news is your shepherd is closer than you think. He's been searching for you this whole time, and he's not showing up with a whip. He's not waiting for you to clean yourself up first. He's coming with strong shoulders and with joy, ready to carry you home. You don't have to earn your way back. You just have to stop running, turn around, and trust him to handle the rest. Or maybe you're in the 99. You've been here for years. You know your Bible. You're doing all the right things. But somewhere along the way, your joy got quiet. Your compassion faded. And you've started grumbling instead of celebrating. Today, your invitation is the same invitation the shepherd gives to the 99. Leave the comfort of the fold, go into the wilderness, and find one. Maybe that means having a real conversation with your neighbor, not a polished presentation of the gospel, just a real conversation where you listening to what happens in their life. You pay attention. Maybe it means inviting a coworker to lunch with no agenda, just providing them a safe place to talk, knowing that you're never going to throw them under the bus. Maybe it means forgiving the family member who hurt you. You realize that you've carried that pain for far too long. Today is the day you decide to lay down that weight. Or maybe it just means that we change our prayer from God bless me to God break my heart for the things that break yours. As we prepare to go to the table today, I want to leave you with two images. The first one is a shepherd alone in the wilderness, a sheep draped across his shoulders, and he's singing as he walks home. The second, a different shepherd, one who also carried something on his shoulders, but it wasn't a sheep. This shepherd carried a cross up a hill, and there he was lifted up, not in triumph, but in agony. And he did it for the one. He did it for the lost. He did it because the heart of God can't bear the thought of even one person not making it home. That's the scandal the Pharisees could never accept. That God would leave the safety of heaven for the wilderness of earth, that he would search for the rebels and the wanderers and the people who wanted nothing to do with him, that he would give his very life to bring the lost ones home. But he did. He searched until he found the one who was lost, and he carried what we could never carry ourselves. Right now, heaven is watching, and according to Jesus, every time a lost person comes home, the party starts all over again. Which means when somebody comes into our building, somebody who is clearly lost, somebody who is wearing the sin and their struggle on every line of their face, we need to be sitting on the edge of our pew, getting ready for the party to start. So here's the question that we carry with us to the table today. Are we going to be the ones going to the party, or are we going to be the ones standing outside in the dark, muttering? Because the table is prepared for the ones who are willing to celebrate the grace and the mercy of the Savior who would leave the 99 to search for the one.